According to a newly released poll, the vast majority of Seattle residents support the idea of crime cameras, despite the fact that the city's socialist mayor does not. This segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. Make sure you sign up for their newsletter to be alerted to opportunities to do just that. All right, the Seattle Chamber of Commerce put out a poll of 500 Seattle voters from August 10th to the 13th. So it was just conducted. The margin of error, 4.4%. But the margin of error don't even matter because the results were so overwhelming. So 74% of respondents say they support the Seattle police crime cameras at Seattle Center and other major event venues, including 53% who said they strongly support that position. 71% support cameras in areas affected by open-air drug markets and high levels of street disorder. So, for instance, 12th and Jackson, 3rd and Pine, 3rd and Pike. 68% said they support real-time monitoring by civilian public safety officials in designated high-crime areas and during major events. So not only do they have overwhelming support for the camera infrastructure themselves, but also for a government bureaucrat sitting in a room somewhere watching those cameras in real time. Now, I always struggle when I see polls like this come out. In the Seattle Chamber of Commerce polls, they use a very reputable polling firm, and they're usually pretty detailed and interesting, and they are usually specific to news events, things that are in the news, that are on people's minds. But what I struggle with is you're telling me 74% support these cameras, but elected a socialist who one of her campaign talking points was opposing the cameras. Are Seattle voters really that spastic? Do just not enough of them vote and they feel this way, but they don't actually vote because there's no one on the ballot that they like? Is it a combination of the two of those things? Because the polling was also done on some other public safety issues that Katie Wilson isn't in support of, that people like Katie Wilson aren't in support of, and she's the mayor and was elected, so it's just confusing to me. For instance, 81% said they would support directing the Seattle Police Department and the city attorney to make shutting down open-air drug markets a top law enforcement priority. 79% said they support banning camping in city parks and within 250 feet of a playground or school, and require the city to clear any encampment in those areas within 72 hours. Kind of shocking, actually. It's 79%. It's homeless drug addicts next to a park where kids play. 75% said they would support changing the state law that says a juvenile can be arrested 5 times for illegally carrying a gun before they face jail time. You know what those voters sound like to me? Conservatives. I mean, they sound like, in Washington state, the very same position that a lot of conservatives take on these issues. Now, some moderate Democrats, obviously, but I imagine the vast majority of these people consider themselves progressives because that's what the electorate in Seattle looks like. So if you support all those things, why are you electing someone like Katie Wilson? Maybe it was just voting against Bruce Harrell, who hadn't done a particularly good job in any of those areas in his 4 years in office, and they just wanted to try something new. I don't know. And then also, it comes after some pretty significant headlines about these issues. It comes after the Bite of Seattle shooting. It comes after all the controversy where Katie Wilson said she wasn't going to turn on the crime cameras outside of the stadium during the World Cup. And on 3rd and Pike, when there was an elderly man who was totally innocent and beaten to the ground and caught by crime cameras. So maybe those news events are sort of lending to a change in public sentiment around the cameras. Meanwhile, Katie Wilson hasn't changed course on her opposition to the cameras. She still shut off the cameras after the World Cup. There were no of these cameras that we know of at the Seattle Center during the shooting. There continue to be issues. In fact, there was just this shootout at Cowgirls. Have you been to Cowgirls? I've only been outside.
Oh, yeah.
That's the one down by the stadium.
We're there every week.
You can ride the bulls, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So there was just a shootout outside Cowgirls, which is a popular bar in Pioneer Square during the stadiums. And there's a question over whether the turned off crime cameras could have helped with this. So Brandon Rollins, who was working security at the bar, told Como News over 20 shots were fired. Everybody inside the club immediately laid down, hit the deck. Music turned off, and we had to escort everybody out the doors. It was a chaotic scene. It's an investigation that Rollins thinks could have been solved rather quickly had the help of 3 nearby city surveillance cameras, which have been turned off since the end of the FIFA World Cup, been active to capture the shootout and its aftermath. Yeah, look, crime cameras can't always prevent crimes, but the idea is that you can very quickly solve crimes. License plates, identify people, where'd they flee, what did they look like, who was involved, but specifically these 3 cameras Katie Wilson ordered turned off the very day the final World Cup match was done in Seattle. And she's being called out now by the Seattle Police Officers Guild. Here we go again, Mayor Katie, and they put out the definition of déjà vu, a feeling that one has seen or heard something before. Here we go again, Mayor Katie, another violent shootout, 3 city surveillance cameras within view, all turned off by mayor's orders. Spog warned that this would happen when proven public safety tools were taken offline. Now Seattle is right back where we started, déjà vu. Now, I've said before, I do understand privacy concerns. I don't want a police state. I don't want police monitoring my every move as I walk about the city, because I'm a law-abiding citizen, right? But I also understand, like, we're in a surveillance state already. If we're concerned about that, I'm not saying let's just keep going. So we can have a conversation about it. But I think the issue is Katie Wilson really hasn't identified specifically what she wants to fix. She seems to flip-flop back and forth. These cameras were already approved to be installed and turned on, and she just sort of put the kibosh on it at a time when we're dealing with things like this. So she just doesn't really seem to know what she's doing. That segment has been brought to you by our friends at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. Sign up for our newsletter to be alerted to opportunities to do just that.